Welcome to the Subconscious Photography Podcast, where art meets science, reality meets perception, all through the lens of a camera. Ready your lenses, open your minds, and let's delve into the fascinating world of subconscious photography. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Subconscious Photography Podcast. This episode has been a long time in the making and a long time coming. In this episode, I interviewed Dan Milnor, who I know as a podcaster, a YouTuber, a magazine enthusiast, a photographer, and what he calls himself as a creative evangelist for the Blurb company. Blurb, in case you guys don't know, is a self-publishing company where you can create books of all kinds, all sizes, all types. It is a tremendous service. I have used it many times, and it is really a fantastic way to print and show your photos, even if you're just showing no one else other than yourself. Dan has the distinction of being the person who interested me in starting this podcast, because I listened to his podcast, For What It's Worth podcast at Shifter Media. And in many ways, and you'll hear this during the interview, he was a beacon of light for myself and my kids during the pandemic, and encouraged us and all his viewers and listeners to get outside and shoot some pictures despite the fact that there was a pandemic on. And so this is a free-ranging conversation. I chose not to cut it into two because we talk about just about everything, and I didn't really want to leave anything out, and I wanted you all to be able to hear it as it unfolded. So without further ado, here is my interview with Dan Milnor, photographer, YouTuber, podcaster, creative evangelist, and all around really, really super nice guy. So I hope you enjoy listening as much as I enjoyed making it. Hey, man.
What's happening?
Oh, man, you can hear me. I can hear you.
Yeah,
I think that's good.
I think this is technology, right?
It's something like that, but I have no idea how I'm going to ever mix this.
Why mix it? Just upload it.
I guess I can just take the recording from this and make it an MP3, right?
Yeah. Are you going to release it as video or just as audio?
Just as audio.
Oh, yeah. I would just separate out the audio track and you should be fine.
Fantastic.
I mean, you're asking the absolute worst person in the world to ask any technical question, but, I'm more than happy to answer.
Well, I appreciate that because I printed out some 84-page thing that I couldn't read while I was in court. So, fake court anyway.
Yeah, court, my favorite place.
Is it?
No, not historically. No, it's right up there with the DMV.
Oh God, that's pretty bad. I mean, it's not that bad, dude. I mean,
I'm one of the sick people who likes jury duty. I think it's fascinating, and I've come close to that top 8, man, the elite 8. I've come close and just gotten booted at the last second every time.
Oh no, what am I doing here with this goddamn thing?
Don't ask me.
I just want to. I hate
started
Teams.
Recording.
All right,
yeah,
there
so
we go.
do I. Teams sucks.
I want to be on jury duty, but I can't. Like every time I try and get on, they tell me, I know all the lawyers, or no lawyers want another lawyer on the jury, and I'm like, I can be fair. I'll listen to everybody.
You're tainted goods.
Well, they just don't want me to tell the jury what the law is.
The interesting thing is that I love the range of excuses that you hear when you're in the main room and they start calling people and the person says, look, I've got dialysis. I'm 85 years old. I have dialysis twice a week. This is going to put an unbelievable strain. And the judge is like, don't give a shit. You're coming to jury duty. And then I get up there, or someone else gets up there and they're like, do you think you can remain objective? And they're like, no, not really. And they're like, you're dismissed. And I'm thinking, right, dude, right. Why be honest? Just say like, no, I think, anyone that's been arrested is guilty 100%. You're like, I'm out of here.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, they all talk about, like, people will call me up and they're like, do you know anybody in the jury? Because we in Philadelphia still have a jury commissioner, Dan. So that's used to be an elected position, but is now not. But they give it to people who run for judge and have lost.
Oh, boy.
So it's like, you're waiting around to run again. So they give you like a nice little job.
Treads.
But people are like, do you know anybody in the office? I'm like, yeah, but it won't help you. Just go in and say you can't be fair. Say you want to give money away. Say you trust cops. You overly trust cops. Or if you got arrested, you must have done something wrong at some time.
Yeah, that's a slam dunk.
That's it, pretty much.
Or you can drop the I'm not normally racist, but, and then they're like, see ya. Yeah,
but
the last couple of times.
When it comes to black defendants with Jewish lawyers, I think generally they're all guilty.
For sure. Both of them are guilty.
I had a judge tell me that one time, and I was the Jewish lawyer in that sentence. So
I love humans.
Don't you? So I love that thing you did today.
Oh, photo fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that's kind of what I've been. Yeah.
John David Bender. Come on, Shermer, Illinois.
Yeah, I mean, John Bender was an absolute. First of all, that movie's unbelievable. I just found out my wife's never seen it. So yeah, never seen it. And so that's on the list now. I love Judd Nelson. I met Judd Nelson in LA once, photographed him in LA at this event that was put on by this woman named Ivy Supersonic. I have no idea where she is now. She was out of New York. They had these models. This is so LA, models in LA that were nude, but then being body painted by celebrities. And of course, Judd Nelson shows up, and Judd Nelson not only shows up, but he is in a vintage cop car, black and white hot rod that parked in the same parking garage that I did. So as we were both waiting for our cars and his came up first, I got a chance to talk to him, and he was super cool. Just a normal dude. But like, I don't know where he's been for the last 20 years, but I love Judd Nelson.
Yes. God, that guy is awesome.
Great role. That role was really everybody in that film was great. So even the I forget his name, but the guy that played the teacher, the disciplinarian guy, he was just so good.
Oh yeah.
You don't want to get the horns. Yeah.
Yeah. I got you for 2 months.
Yeah. Love it.
So, all right, I guess we can start, although I guess we have started because now we've unlocked the keys to jury duty.
Yeah.
Racist judges.
Yeah.
What is there any other societal problem? Breakfast clubs. Is there any other societal problems we need to try and resolve right now? I mean,
oh man, I think the general malaise that's affecting America is stupidity. But I think the stupidity part is underlying with and I don't think you can totally blame it on the education system, but I was thinking back to my education, and there's this phrase that always pops out at me about education, which was the term busy work. And I don't know if students have this today, but when I was coming up in like middle school, high school, there were plenty of days where the teacher just didn't want to do anything, or the teacher wanted to get a jump start on the weekend by grading papers during the week during class. So they would say, okay, today is busy work.
Yep.
And basically you would open your textbook to whatever page they told you to, and you just wrote word for word what was on the page for an hour, so that they could do something else. And I just remember thinking, this is not good for education. And then as I got older and I started meeting kids that had gone to school overseas, I just felt like the dumbest guy in the room. I was like, okay, our education system is not on par. And I think it's an outdated curriculum. I think the faculty is woefully not ill prepared, but underfunded. And I don't think putting the 10 Commandments on the wall is going to make a damn bit of difference for anyone. And so I think there's a dumb problem in America, but I think it's tied to a lot of other things. And I have no solutions. I'm just the guy in the background that's with the big foam finger, but it's a foam middle finger. It's not the index finger.
Well, I mean, we don't have to discuss gun control because I think our views on guns are the same. I didn't shoot them like you did, but I've shot them. And I don't think we should ban them. But I think at the same time, when a 14-year-old can grab an AR-15 and run to his school and shoot the place up, that's a problem. And that's not a problem. That's not a problem that I think the law can completely resolve, because a lot of that is how'd the kid have access to it in the home?
Yeah, I think, I grew up, my father was a competitive shooter. I was a competitive shooter. My mother was taught concealed carry for Texas DPS. Brother and sister didn't really shoot at all, but there is like a subculture of the gun guy who's just completely and utterly illogical about everything. Like it's the deflect. And that's from the head of the NRA down, of like, oh, now they're all concerned about mental health. Great. Yeah, we do have a mental health problem. And that's something that we have to address. They don't actually want to address it. They just want to deflect from the issues. So there's absolutely no reason for civilians to have weapons of war. Nobody hunts with an AR-15, regardless of what these nuts tell you. That is not a hunting weapon. Frankly, I've shot the AR-15 several times. It's been many, many years. I was never in love with it. My father owned one for a short time back in probably the 80s. We all shot it. Nobody liked it, got rid of it. It was really not a useful gun in any way, shape, or form. And, I don't see, but here's the flip side of this. The gun control folks, the people who want to pass gun control, even up to the high levels, often have not even educated themselves enough about the topic to understand the vernacular associated with the story. So when you use the improper terms, it feeds the fire for the gun folks who say, see, you're trying to ban my grandfather's hunting rifle, which is a semi-automatic. And a lot of the anti-gun folks don't even take the time to understand the terms. So again, there's dumb on both sides. There's people, lazy, emotional folks who are just saying ban everything, which is impossible, by the way. How many tens of millions of guns are on the street? Not to mention how many guns are manufactured overseas. And have we stopped anything from overseas coming into this country successfully at any point? No. So even, there's so few. Even I think like Ruger might be the only, maybe this has changed, but at one point, I think Ruger was the only American brand making stuff in America, but most of it's manufactured and been sent overseas. And it's funny because that's something that like the flag waving folks, and you're seeing this with Harley right now, the blowback about Harley outsourcing parts and labor and stuff to overseas, and the riders saying, hey, we don't want this anymore. Everything has to be made in America. Well, wait till that bill comes in when you see the cost increase for a Harley. But, some of the gun waving folks who are talking about this, buying guns, they don't realize these are being manufactured overseas. But again, all these topics are complicated. And until we remove the emotion from it and talk about what's actually really happening. But, yesterday or the day before, there was the shooting in Georgia, 416 shootings since Columbine, I think. It just becomes like noise in the night. And you realize that, this happened to me living in LA when I heard a shootout in the middle of the night. And I was like, well, they're not shooting at me. So it's like, I'll be fine, because your gunfire in LA at the time was so frequent that it just became noise in the night. And I think that's what's happened to Americans, is that this is such a frequent occurrence now. I mean, how much worse could it have been, the Uvalde thing, the shooting in Uvalde, and the response and the lies and the cover-ups and all that? We're like, man, we got a lot of work to do as a country and a species. We got a lot of work to do.
So maybe we ought to tell people who I'm speaking to, since we didn't do that. Our guest today is Dan Milnor, a person whose podcast I found during the pandemic, whose podcast is now, I think, still around, For What It's Worth podcast. But your podcast, and so let me just say, your podcast really helped my then 8-9-year-old son get through the pandemic, because every night I would put him to bed and he was anxious. He was in the 4th grade or the 5th grade. He was going from 4th to 5th. And then 6th grade was the year that everybody was out, just virtual. But 5th grade was the year where it was half a year virtual. And we found your podcast, and I would put him to bed, and he would ask me if I could play it on my phone and stick my phone under his pillow so that he could go to sleep while we both listened to it. And to this day, he always asks me, if you like pickles from a barrel from, I can't remember what kind of deli, and then you take them outside and eat them in the parking lot, then this podcast is for you.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. And during the pandemic, you were releasing, I think, like on the regular every week or twice a week. I mean, it was crazy because you weren't really heavy on YouTube then. Yeah. And you were doing Q&A, and I sent you a couple of questions, and you said my name on the podcast, and I thought he was going to pass out. So, and of course, you were kind enough to answer all my questions about starting a podcast, my podcast, and then to appear on it. This is only the 6th episode. So I really appreciate it, but I wanted you to know that. And I also wanted the listeners to know that you do have somewhat of a photography background, so that this is not just some random conversation between two people in their 50s.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start out like I'm deposing you in court. Can you just tell us your name, rank, and serial number, and what your connection is to photography?
Yeah, my name is Dan Milnor, and I am I would call it a former professional photographer, although I do still make the occasional professional photo. And my relationship to photography goes back to the late 80s. 1987 was the first time that I really I watched a photographer work in 1987 on a ship off of South America. And I was like, I couldn't figure out what this guy was doing. I couldn't figure out why he was always on the opposite side of where all of us were. And then I realized, oh, that guy's looking at light. He's looking at how he's looking at us, but he's looking at the light, and he's framing us based on where the light is. And I'd never thought about light. So that goes back to 87. And then it was trying to think of about 89 when I decided I wanted to study photography. And then I got a degree, and I've been in and around photography ever since. That means working as a professional photographer, having my own business. I worked in the news industry for a long time. I did editorial, commercial, portraiture, but I also worked for Kodak Professional for 4 years, which introduced me to an incredible number of the best photographers that were working in the U.S. at the time. And then I started working for Blurb 13 years ago, and I'm still sort of 1 foot around the professional and prosumer photography markets, because I do a lot of programming and a lot of education, a lot of things for those groups. And also I am prone to watching people who eat pickles out of enormous jars on the counter of, the fact that your son loves that is just, I love your son not knowing him, but the fact that struck a chord with him, because every time, and this only happens to me in Texas when I'm visiting the family. I'm sure it happens in New Mexico, but I never see it. But in Texas, when you're waiting to pay at the counter at the stop and go, someone will come in and reach over the top of that pickle, that enormous pickle thing. Forget about using a clip or a retrieval device. They just reach in with their hand into the brine and pull out this enormous pickle and then down the thing in the parking lot. It's a spectacle. And I'm hoping that's all America. I'm hoping that no one else in the world has figured that out yet, because it's so jarring when you see it that you're like, I doubt my existence as a human.
So, yeah, that really struck home with him. And then my daughter, who's, I guess 2 years younger than him, she's like now just catching up. Right. So he's 16 now and she's 12 now, and she's just catching up. So like she doesn't remember the podcast as much as watching you on YouTube consistently. And she's like, is that guy going to make more YouTube videos? And I said, I think he's going to make some more, but not as many. And you did read one of my questions on a YouTube video, and she's like, he said your name. And then you did a blurb class that I attended, and I turned it on my laptop while we were eating dinner, and I asked a question. You acknowledged me, and she was like, he said your name again. I'm like, he's answering a question. That's my name. I'm the one who submitted the question. So
no, yeah, it's good. I mean, you're basically becoming a celebrity in your own home.
That's really, and that's really what I strive for.
It happened to me. It happened to me once with my nephew, one of my nephews. I was with a boss at Blurb, former boss, during COVID. We were outside south of San Francisco on the peninsula. She asked if I could get together. She happened to be in the same neighborhood. We went to have coffee, and the coffee shop had built this sort of platform out into the parking lot during COVID. And I'm sitting there talking with her, and I see this guy coming out of the parking lot, and I'm like, he's coming for me. I know it. I just know it. There was not a single other person around, and he's like beelining, and he comes over to me and he goes, hey, are you Dan Milnor? And I'm like expecting the worst here. My boss has this kind of look of panic on her face. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, oh, I love your YouTube channel. And I was like, why? And he said, oh, I'm in tech. I don't do photography, but I like what you say and talk about how the industry used to be. And I was like, well, what do you do in tech? And I want to say, he said, I built Fortnite.
Oh, my.
The game.
Yeah.
And my nephew was a big Fortnite player. And so when I went home, I casually said, oh, I met the guy that did Fortnite. And my nephew said, no, who was it? And I was like, oh, I told him. And he went and immediately looked him up, and he goes, holy cow, that's like the guy that did Fortnite. And then suddenly my status in the family went from no status to oh, maybe my uncle actually is of value in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I guess it's exactly the same, except you're not the guy who created Fortnite, because if you were, they would all be here right now.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. And I probably had the name of the game wrong, but I'm in my head it was Fortnite. But anyway, we should talk about photography, right?
Yeah. So here's my question for you, because you started taking pictures probably about the same time I started taking pictures in the late 70s with my mom's knicker mat. But then I became a lawyer, and so I never really bought a digital camera. So I got stuck in this film rut. And then in 2015 or 16, when I moved houses, I found my old Nikon FM, pulled it out. It had half a roll of Tri-X in it. Not even. I took a couple pictures of the kids. They came running around the back of the camera. They're like, where's the picture? I'm like, what do you mean, where's the picture? It's on film. And then they asked the question, Dan, the question that no man who was born in the mid to late 60s ever wants to hear. What's film?
Yeah, it's a dagger.
I'm like, what do you mean, what's film? So since then, I bought every Nikon I could never afford. So I have, every F ever made, 1 through 6, and then never bought digital cameras. But so here's my first question for you. This podcast is for you if you know why a lonely, lonely dime is so important to have in your camera bag.
For the Hasselblad when it jams.
Well, that, and for any Nikon screw.
Oh, yeah.
Because the width apparently is the size of a yen or some coin in Japan that they manufactured it all for. So let me ask you this. I mean, you've been in the business, in and around the business and the industry for your entire career, and you've seen it change. And I guess I really want to know why you think there are some people who are younger than us who think that film is so awesome and so much better, and why there's this whole sub industry of camera apps to give your phone pictures that film look. Or because, for me, it's clearly nostalgia, right? Like, I worked in film labs. I was the guy in your mall 1 hour photo lab where you dropped your film off and went to go have some Sparrow pizza. And then, I'm really dating myself and come back for your pictures, right? Like, I'm that guy. And I took wedding pictures and all that. And so for me, the film is what I'm comfortable with, and it evokes memories for me just because that's all I ever used, right? Yeah. Like not for any other sentimental reason. But what I don't get are people like my kids who say, "Hey, what's film?" and then end up being like, I don't want to use the word Nazi, but film Nazis. There I did.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. We didn't grow up with anything digital. I had, when I was in Indiana as a kid and we would hide from tornadoes in the basement, we had a black and white TV with Pong, like the Pong game. And Pong, if I played Pong for more than 5 minutes, I couldn't sleep for the next week. It just like rewired my brain. So, but other than that, there was really no analog. And then Atari came out, and my neighbor kid friends, they got Atari, but my parents were like, no effing way, we're going to get you Atari. So I didn't grow up with any digital device in my hand, but a lot of the people who are running the big film communities now, or the sort of like hipster types on YouTube who are doing the film stuff, they're much younger, and they did come up with digital everything. So the limitations of film became the draw. They were like the fact that you can't see it. It does have a different look. The cameras themselves sort of lent themselves, the look and feel of the cameras lent themselves to the hipster sort of hipsterness of the whole movement. But then what happened, I think the second wave, is that the sort of hipster types realized, oh, I can sort of, without any kind of formal training in photography or knowing anything about photography, or even really the ability to make anything remarkable as a photographer, I can build a huge following just based on the hipsterness of film. And they've been super successful. And I think a lot of times people confuse what I say about them as like slamming them, but actually to build these communities of that size is a specific skill. It may or may not have anything to do with photography. And in most cases, those people are not making pictures that I look at and say, wow, this is different, or this is unique, or there's a consistency of the work here. Now, occasionally I do see someone. There was a guy that someone just made a film about. Someone sent it to me. I watched probably 5 minutes of it, and it was quite long, but I am so slammed right now, and I leave for Japan in a week. So there's no time for me to watch like a 40-minute film on anything. But within 5 minutes of the film, I said, and this was a guy I want to say he's based in LA. I was like, that guy can shoot. That guy's a photographer. He knows how to build depth. He's been working in the same communities, in the same projects with same people for years. That's a legitimate dude. But I had never heard of him until that time. And frankly, I don't think he's got his own channel. I think he's shooting all the time. So instead of saying like, well, I'll go make some average pictures, but I really know how to build my YouTube base, he's out making a set of negatives that 50 or 100 years from now, people are going to look back on as a statement about Los Angeles at that time frame. And that to me is like the long play. I think every good doc photographer out there is thinking marathon, not sprint. And it's very different from the community. But the truth is also, and the last thing I'll say about this is, if you're a working professional photographer, there are not many cases today for where film is going to work. It just logistically is not going to work for what clients need or want. So when I see these people who are describing themselves as professional photographers, and I look and they're like, whatever, a street photographer in New York City, I think the percentage of those folks who are making a living from their photography is tiny, because there really isn't a market for street photography. There's a market for the audience that they've put together to sell their audience other products from other brands. But those people are not like doing, not all of them, I'm sure some of them are, but like a lot of those folks are probably never done an assignment in their life. So it's it's just a different approach to photography. I'm going to avoid the industry. I'm going to build a following, and I'm going to make my living off the following, or I'm going to engage and try to become whatever, editorial, commercial advertising photographer. And they're both minefields, and they're very, very different worlds. But I love film. I still probably have 300 or 400 rolls of film. I have all my film cameras from 6x9 down to 35. They just logistically do not work for what I'm doing right now. So I shoot digital, but if ever there's a project in the future that film will work, I would be right back to using it.
I mean, I shot a lot of weddings and bar mitzvahs with Hasselblads with film. And we used to have, and I still have, some 70 millimeter back so that we could get more than 12 pictures on a roll, right? I mean, you must remember doing work with a Hasselblad and running out of film after the first 12 shots. You're like, I either got to reload this back, find another back in my bag, remember what film I have loaded in that other bag, all that kind of stuff. But like people today, I hear wedding photographers saying, oh, they're getting more and more requests for film, to have film shots at their wedding. I'm like, why? They like, half lit, misfired flash pictures of themselves, or they poorly metered foreground, background, and midground shots because you're doing them on the fly pictures, or like pictures that aren't focused all the way across the frame. I mean, so I don't.
It's look, the hipster thing transcends not just the photography space, but also the clients. And the thing about the hipster culture that's interesting to me, and it's one of the reasons why I really don't engage with the hipster culture at all, is that the hipster culture is not about originality. It's about copying what's already been done. So that could be a theme of the 60s or 70s, and all of a sudden people are wearing knit hats and flannel shirts when it's 90 degrees. And you see, and they, they're cuffed pants rolled up, they're buying old VW vans. It's all been done before. And so clients are doing what they see other clients doing. And I frankly think that this is tied almost 100% to Instagram. Instagram has brought a level of candy cookie cutter conformity that is just absolutely mind-numbingly boring. To see that hipster, if I see, for example, how many times, and I've said this before, a woman with like a felt hat in a Serape with a dog and an old Land Cruiser in a national park. And like how many companies are using that to brand themselves? The American road trip. It's just like, it's imagery that passes your eyes and never connects with your brain because your brain's seen it so much. So wedding clients, and I shot weddings for many years in Southern California, there was a tremendous amount of conformity in those clients. Oftentimes they wanted what they had already seen. And so one of the trickiest parts for me as a photographer was finding, I had somebody I worked with in LA, Santa Barbara, Hawaii, and Palm Springs. These were planners. And it took me a long time in working with them and meeting with them and showing them work to finally get the point across that I was the guy for the clients they could not figure out. Right. When they had the weird clients, they would call and say, Dan, I got one for you. I got one for you. The rest of the clients, they wanted the digital guys who would brag about shooting 10,000 frames at a wedding, and clients who would go, oh, that must be great to have that many frames. And in my head, I'm like, oh my God, first of all, why would you shoot that many frames? Two, if you're dumping those on a client, like they don't know how to edit. Shooting 10,000 frames tells me you just don't know what you're doing. And, you know, your job as a photographer is to edit for them. So I would always get the people that were the weird ones or the arty ones that people would say they don't really fit that cookie cutter profile. And it was great because with 4 planners in 4 separate locations, I could book my 10 jobs a year, which was all I wanted to do. And I always worked with people who just looked at me and said, dude, I trust you. You know, I saw what you can do. And oh, by the way, I would never show them wedding photographs. I would only show, I always met in person, and I wanted to see the inside of their house, because I wanted to see what they had on the walls and what their furniture looked like and their style. And if there were any red flags, I got myself out of those jobs. And I just said, look, here's my documentary work. And the clients that booked me would say, are you going to do this for us at the wedding? And I'd say, yes. And they'd be like, great, you're the guy. That was it.
Right. I mean, yeah, go ahead.
No, that's it.
I was going to say, I remember working for a guy who would meet people, but he would meet them in his like row house studio, you know, which was like a living room, right? That had these giant, I don't know, they must have been 16 by 20 prints of brides with their gowns that were like hand retouched, because we had an old guy there that did retouching. Thank God I didn't have to do that, because that would have driven me bonkers. And he would sell the packages, Dan. Right? Do you want this package with this many, that package? And then he taught me my first sort of not the most honest way to conduct yourself as a photographer, when he said to me, listen, we never try and sell table photos at the meeting. We wait until we're at the wedding. We wait till people have the father, the bride, whoever's paying, has a few drinks in them, and say, look, remember when we said we were going to be able to cover everybody at the wedding, either in formal pictures or candids? Well, we're not going to be able to do it. So how about we do all the tables, but we'll cut that number in half. And instead of charging you $10 a table or whatever it was, we'll charge you $5 a table. I'm like, should we really be doing that? Because you know what those pictures look like. Aunt somebody always has a fork full of salad. Like this, and it's bad. It's just bad.
Look, the weddings peak with the bride getting ready. To me, that was always from the bride getting ready, which was always by far my favorite part. And it was always like some of the most intimate times and truthful times and quiet times. And the brides would be so in their head. I'd be standing right next to them, and they'd see the pictures and say, I have no idea you were even there, because they were so in their own head. And that to me was amazing. And then and I like the ceremony as well. I really like the ceremony. But to your earlier point, I shot weddings with a Hasselblad with one back. I had a second back. I had a second back as a backup, but I could load the Hasselblad so fast, and 2 Leicas. So, and I would shoot black and white. So I had 2. I would start the ceremony. The beginning of the ceremony would have a fresh roll in the Hasselblad, 12 frames, and then I'd have the 2 Leicas. So I would definitely reload at least once or twice during the ceremony. But by the time at the end of the wedding, my goal was to have about 200 images total. And photographers hear that and they like fall down clutching their chest, because they're like, oh my God, that's it. And I'm like, 200 images is a lot of images. Like, what are you trying to do here?
Well,
I'm not shooting every table setting. I'm not photographing the cupcakes. I could give a shit. Like, let's talk about what this day actually means. And again, that goes back to finding the right clients. Like if a client said to me, oh, you need a picture of everybody at the wedding. Great. I'll find you another photographer. Like, that's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to make a handful of pictures that your grandkids are going to want to have on the wall, because they're going to be so simple and clean and powerful and historic. And I look at any photography as the same thing. When I'm doing a documentary project, if I'm lucky, I spent years on projects and ended up with no more than somewhere between 30 and 50 images. That's after years of working. Like, how many pictures do you need? And I think digital and sort of the online culture has just blown that out of the water. I mean, I haven't done weddings in a long time, but I talked to one of the planners and she said, yeah, they look like wedding teams show up now and they look like NSA operatives, like in all black with headsets and drones and like all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm so glad I'm not around that anymore.
Yeah, I used to have to I carried the step ladder. We didn't have a drone. Dan, that's how we got high, was on a step ladder.
The step ladder. Oh,
like, it was awful. But so
that's
that
early drone.
A drone. Well, so let me ask you this question then. What are we going to do with, by the way, when I was introducing you, I failed to thank you for introducing me to the work of Salgado and Platon and the photographer's name who's going right out of my head now, who does all the environmental landscape pictures. Yeah. That's some great work. And for me, photography was always about sort of both for me, the person making the picture, to make a piece of history. Like, what was I feeling? What was I thinking? Where was I at this time, date, and place? But also to try and make something that would, even though the viewer may not have been at the same place or ever been to the same place, to make them think about something, right? Yeah. In their life, or that they could relate to. And now I saw some statistic that like last year, I think it was, there were like 1.5 trillion photos taken worldwide, compared to like the highest year during film, I think was, in the billions, which is still a lot. But where are all those pictures going to live? A, and B, how are people going to, like, everybody's literally, I mean, I know this is a phrase that's overused, but everybody's a photographer. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know whether it's cheapened it, because I agree with you about Instagram. I certainly feel like Instagram has cheapened the work in the sense that everybody's a copycat. But I just don't know. Like, it's a lot of pictures, and I think about how many pictures I would develop at the mini lab I worked at in a week or a day or whatever, and then I try and wrap my head around the number of shots that are being taken just on phones. Forget digital cameras, and I can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a merger of different things. It's a merger of the ease and accessibility of having a camera in your hand with your phone, but it's also the advent of the social networks, because now it's a show me culture. So I was here in Santa Fe last weekend. I can't remember what was going on. I was out in public. There was something happening. It was like a car show or something. And I watched adults, groups of adults, whether it was couples or groups of four, taking selfies nonstop in front of, I'm in front of La Fonda. Oh, I need a selfie here of me. Oh, I'm in front of the car. Oh, I need another selfie of me. It is bizarre. And that's not really about the photography. That is about posting that image. And the networks, the guys who wrote the code that developed these networks, they were very honest. They built the networks to exploit human vulnerability, which they have done masterfully. Social media has set us back as a species, decades. I don't think we will ever recover from it. And I don't think we can survive social media if we continue to go down the path that we're on. I just don't think the world has enough resources to sustain these networks. But I think most of those pictures are irrelevant. And I think a lot of those were, they're not intended for, any sort of historical purpose. But I also think, too, there's been a change in the sense that photographers come out now and this is not necessarily bad, it's just different. They come out now pointing the camera at themselves. Whereas my generation, the generation after, and maybe one more generation, we're still being trained to point the camera into the world, that we were not the story. The story was out there. And so there is a particular feeling you get as a photographer who was trained during that era, when you are capturing something that has nothing to do with you other than the fact that you're the one framing it up, and you realize what kind of like once in a lifetime moment you have. That is a particularly unique feel. That is the most powerful drug. If you're a photographer, that's the most powerful drug there is. And now I see a lot of folks who are the cameras on themselves all the time. And I'm not sure they ever had that feeling or even want that feeling of making a picture of something else that's so different. So it's just, I think, just a merger of different societal changes and how people, view it. I cannot imagine standing in front of something. Let's just make it up, the Taj Mahal. And looking at the Taj Mahal, traveling from New Mexico all the way over to India to get to the Taj Mahal, and thinking to myself, what would make this just a little bit better is me in front of the Taj Mahal. And
not the sunset, not the sunset.
No, not the sunset, not having a portrait of the architect, not having, the guys that are cleaning the grounds, nothing. No, I think just me in front of the Taj Mahal. And then I think what I should really do is just post this so that anyone every stranger and bot and person in my network will know that I'm in front of the Taj Mahal. That is the most unnatural, bizarre, creepy feeling. I can't imagine doing that. And yet I know I'm the 1%.
You know what? Now that you've said that, I'm imagining, can you imagine if Salgado took a selfie in front of all the people hauling gold out of the ground and made that the cover of his book?
Yeah, I think it would. I don't think it would have ever crossed his mind.
No, but I feel like that's what you're saying, right? Like,
yeah, basically it's like
all these people are getting gold out of the ground. They're not the story. Let me put myself in.
I mean, look, as a photographer, you have to promote. There's no doubt about it. Promotion has been part of the scenario since the beginning. And there have always been people who are better at promotion than others. But we now live in an age where you can just promote. You don't even need the work to promote. You can just promote. And frankly, a lot of those folks are super successful. You look at their photography and you're like, this isn't on a scale of 1 to 10. It's not on a scale, but they have massive followings because they know how to promote.
So that brings me to a question I wanted to make sure I ask you, which is, if everybody agrees that the platforms are bad, but on the other hand, nobody can figure out how to promote their work absent the platforms. How do you hold those two thoughts in harmony?
So not everyone agrees the platforms are bad. There's plenty of people out there that absolutely love these platforms. They are all in 100%. They're up at 3:00 in the morning to feed the algorithm, and they don't think twice about it. They think,
let me just stop you real quick and say, yeah. I was approached about filing a lawsuit against one of the platforms, and the lawyers who are doing it, it's a group of lawyers nationwide, told me what the algorithms are really used for, or not really used for, but or a few of the things that they're used for, and that the parent company of the platform makes money on transactions that you and I and most civilized human beings would have to excuse themselves and go throw up if they knew what it was, and that the platforms get a certain percentage of every single one of those transactions. So yeah. when we say not everybody agrees that they're bad, I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
But they're bad. I mean, they're being used for bad things that they could stop, and they don't.
there's no reason for them to stop because of the profits that are being made, and the fact that they have so much power now. Our Congress is too old to even understand what Facebook is. So when Mark Zuckerberg sits and smirks in front of Congress, he knows that there's no one in that room that has any clue about what he's talking about. So they can do whatever. We know that companies have purposely stoked genocide. We know that they've purposely targeted teen girls. The people, the creatives, the photographers, the people who are still using these platforms are knowingly accepting those terms. They know, I mean, this is not new news. You go back to just take 2016 in particular and research the violations of whether it's, privacy or purposely targeting people that happened in 2016 alone. Look at Cambridge Analytica during the election. It goes on and on. But the truth is that people, and this is what people have such a hard time understanding, they are physically addicted. This is a physical addiction like drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, whatever it is. But there is such a reluctance to accept that because billions of people are addicted. So, I mean, how many photographers do I know that I do not hang out with anymore? I don't talk to them. I don't want to be around them because I'm never with them. I am with them and Instagram. They cannot get through a conversation without either trying to show me something on Instagram or just absentmindedly checking their feed in the middle of the conversation. So it's a real problem for folks to do that. But I deleted my networks, almost all the networks in 2014, I think it was. And everyone's like, oh, you're going to go out of business. No, I'm not. I didn't go out of business. In fact, my life got exponentially better. They don't want to hear that.
How did you do it? How did you, because I didn't know your work in 2014. And yeah. I must have stumbled upon the For What It's Worth podcast as audio and then subsequently on YouTube.
To your point about promotion without the networks, when people say, oh, I don't know how else to do that, it's a cop-out. There are plenty of ways of promoting yourself without using social networks. When someone says to me, well, I need these to be able to get my work, it's bullshit. They are addicted to the platform. They do not know what else to do because when they wake up in the morning, they grab their phone. And when they're going to sleep at night, it's the last thing in their hand is checking their feeds. The most successful people out there I see, they might be using these networks, but it is 5% of what they're doing. The people who are all in on the networks have no chance of survival in the long run. They will all go out of business if they're photographers because Instagram ROI fell off a cliff 18 months ago. Now everyone's looking and saying, well, I guess I got to go to TikTok. It's embarrassing. I don't want to do it. I don't like it, but I guess I have to. No, it's too late. If you're thinking you're going to go to TikTok now, it's too late. You better figure out what the next network is. But the truth is you have to build your own ecosystem. And this is the tricky part. Because people want instant gratification. They want that dopamine hit all day, every day. And that's what social gives. If you want to build your own ecosystem, you have to disconnect. You have to determine who you actually are. You have to determine what it is you're trying to say. You have to learn how to make unique work. And you need to learn how to build community, one actual human being at a time. It is slow, but the people who have done it are the survivors. They will be here in 10 years and everybody else will be floundering or gone or trying to play the online game. The people who built their own ecosystems are impervious to what happens to Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and Clubhouse and Substack and Medium. It's a deck of every day. Flip through the deck of cards. Oh, you should 2 years ago. Oh, you got to be on Medium. Got to be on Medium. Now it's Substack. Got to be on Substack. No, you don't. Have your own site. Have your own email newsletter, have your own ecosystem. And there are plenty of examples of people out there who are absolutely killing it because 10 years ago, they said, I don't trust these networks and these algorithms are changing and they're wanting more and more of my time and more of my life. And I'm getting less return. Someone was talking to me the other day. I was out in the field with another photographer and someone said I have 1,000 Instagram followers, but I only see 5 of them because the rest is all advertising. And my friend's like, yeah, you're never going to see the rest of them because they're just going to feed you what they want to feed you. And I was like, why are you even on that? Why are you still there? And it's because they do not know what to do. And frankly, a lot of people don't want to work hard. They just don't. They want to just lazily get into the same stream that everybody else is in. I'm going to use Instagram to promote. I see it in the book world all the time. Last year, when I did Review Santa Fe, which is a great event here in Santa Fe. It's a jury thing where a couple of hundred photographers are accepted. They get to come in and show their work to a bunch of like legit folks, gallerists, curators, agents, art buyers, that kind of thing. And this woman came up to the Blur booth and she was looking at things and she's like, hey, I really want to do this book and I want to sell X amount of copies. And I was like, okay, well, what's your plan? And she goes, I'm on Facebook. And I was like, that's not a plan. And she was like, yeah, it's funny because I don't really get a really good response. And I'm like, yeah, that's not a sales plan. Instagram is not a sales plan. They're looky-loos. I did an interview with a book publicist a while back, a book agent. And I said to her, hey, is it me or, am I crazy to tell people that they don't need social media? And she goes, no, you don't need social media at all. And she goes, those are just window watchers. That's not effective to sell books. She goes, an email newsletter is the single most effective thing you can have. And I was like, okay, there. I'm not crazy. I've been watching this for 13 years.
That's still true.
Yeah. So the email newsletter has not only 10 times the engagement of social media, but people devote 10 times the amount of time to their email than they do to social. And they are far more likely to engage with their pocketbooks than social media followers. So trust me, I have 2,800 people signed up to an email newsletter I've never sent. I've been talking about this for a year and a half now, right? I'm going to send one. I'm finally going to send one. I haven't sent one. And this is after I deleted everybody. So I deleted everybody.
I signed up the first time and then you're like, okay, I've deleted you all. So now you all have to sign up again.
Yeah. So 2,800 people have signed up. Now imagine if I said to this group of people, which eventually I will, I know exactly, I sort of pseudo pitched blurb on this a while back. I want to do a print run of 200 custom books. So 200 books that have just slight customizations. Could be a linen cover, could be foil stamping, something pretty basic, but like a weird hybrid book that's part photography book, part sort of documentary book. If I went out and said to those 2,800 people, okay, folks, I finally have something legitimate that I think is worth your time and effort and your money because I'm going to sell these books. And the goal with selling 200 copies of a book is not to make money. That's just to sell through the run. How fast do you think those books would go? 200 copies with 2,800 people.
Less than 6 or 8 hours.
Yeah. And that to me is a sustainable publishing model where I could say, look, anybody who wants the book, here's the pre-sale number. The pre-sale number is a discount and it's X amount for the book. If I pre-sold that run, it would easily pay for the print run. So I'm not out of pocket, and I'm also not printing 1,500 or 2,000 books that I have nowhere to put that I think I'm going to sell to strangers and make a profit on. It's delusional. But again, it all depends on the ecosystem that you've built. And here's where you have to give a nod to the YouTubers of the world, because a lot of these YouTubers could easily sell through a book run, regardless of whether or not the work is interesting at all. And in fact, a lot of the books I've seen from the YouTubers, it's not that they're bad books, but I look at the work and some of the designs and I'm like, okay, this is like not anything I haven't seen before, but they have an audience. They have an audience of real people that are out there that are like, hey, if you have 500,000 followers on YouTube and you sell 1,000 books, that's a pretty doable thing. And a lot of the folks who are mired in the old ideology of the industry haven't figured this out yet. And they frankly don't want to work that hard. They want to just keep going on Instagram and just think that it's somehow magically going to work out. But the percentage of people I see being successful on Instagram is probably in the low single digits. The rest of them are just wasting their time.
All right. Well, I read your newsletter. I mean, every time I get an email from you, I read it. And you're right. People. That's not
even my newsletter.
No, I know. It's just when it's a alert that you've posted something on your blog.
Yeah. I mean, the newsletter is going to be the separate thing, and it's pretty interesting. But I totally agree. It's a lot of people read and they keep saying, "Hey, is this the newsletter?" And I'm like, nope. The newsletter is going to be a separate thing.
Just because I signed up to get notifications when you publish a new blog post. So really quick, let me ask you then, your new, boy, it just keeps going right out of my head. The one you did today, photo fiction, which I think is an awesome thing because it really will make people have to tell stories only about one image as opposed to trying to tell stories with 10 images. And it combines two things I like, photography and writing and storytelling. And so, how did you come up with that idea?
I've been thinking about this for a long time, years, but I was working on my New Mexico project a few weeks ago. I was up north at a place called Maxwell Wildlife Refuge, and I had already decided in weeks prior to that the project that I originally started out to do was impossible for me working full time for Blurbs. So that would have taken, best case scenario was at least a decade. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to turn this from an A-level story to a B-level story. I just have to become okay with that. And as I was driving around in Maxwell, I realized that even the B-level story was going to take years and years and years to pull off. And like looking at my upcoming schedule, I was like, this may be something I just never get through. And I felt like it was my ideology of the project was actually holding me back. So I thought, okay, how do I tell a story, but tell a story that takes the burden off of me of remaining inside the boundaries of what the story is? And so I was like, okay, I know photographically the kind of images that I can make that will tell this story that don't require me the massive amounts of time and access that I need to do. And then I realized that writing fictional narratives, number one, is something I love. And two, writing in general is something I love. But also it allows me to tell the story in a really different way. And the photo fiction to me is fun. It's just an exercise. I put an hour time limit on myself to do the story. The picture, I just see something. In fact, sitting at a picnic table, and I looked down and I saw the Shane Bender thing, and I was like, who's Shane Bender? And like, what was he doing here in 2015? And why would he take the time to carve his name into the table? And I went over and I sat down on the river rocks. I didn't have a chair. And I went over, I was up north near the Colorado border on a trout stream. And my wife was like asking me a million questions. And I was like, I need to tune out here for like an hour. And I just went and sat on the river, and I just refused to allow myself to leave the brain of Shane Bender. And there's so many ways of getting distracted. I was, because I'm fishing as well. So I'm like watching the light patterns, and I can sight fish, and I can see trout, and I'm like, oh, I should be fishing. And then I was like, no, for your hour, this is your job. Your job is to be Shane Bender for an hour. And it was just like, it's a discipline sort of procedure. It's a disciplinary endeavor to force yourself to do that. The photo was already made. I just needed to imagine what it was like to be this person. And I love this project because you can do it anywhere. And it's something that my students in Japan next week, this is one of their assignments, is going to be to create a piece of photo fiction. And so it's, you don't need much. A single image with a good narrative makes you realize that if you're going to do a book of images, you don't really need more than 8 or 10 images if you have good stories to tell. And it's just fun. It was a safety valve of saying, I can't get to the A project, I can't get to the B project, but this C project should be interesting. And it's going to force me to do things I'm normally not doing.
But dude, a pencil factory, classic, a pencil factory, right?
I've been thinking about that because I think I know where that came from. I think I know the pencil factory came, and I don't know this for sure because I didn't think it at the time, but subliminally, I think it was there, is Wonder Boy's Michael Chabon. When the Tobey Maguire character is being interviewed in the car by Michael Douglas, and he says his parents worked at a mannequin factory. And that always jumped out. First of all, that book is amazing. I think that movie is amazing. It's one of my favorites. And when I heard mannequin factory, I was like, who thought of that? Like, that's brilliant. Where did that come from? Because it's such there is maybe nothing more odd than a mannequin factory. And I was like, because I always make jokes about mannequin hands. Like, anybody that you find that has a stack of mannequin hands, you need to like make sure you stay away from them. So I'm guessing that subliminally that moment in Wonder Boys rubbed off on me, and that's where the pencil factory came from.
Yeah, because I was like, oh yeah, he's going to go work in a family business. It's like some really profitable business, and then you drop pencil factory, and I was like, okay, that was not what I expected. But and he doesn't want to go into middle management in a pencil factory. Like, what the hell's he doing?
Yeah, he's on the line. He's just working the line.
A pencil factory. So just to wrap it up, do us a favor and tell everybody where they can go listen to and watch the pencil factory. What your website?
Yeah, the easiest way to find me is shifter.media, and that's SHIFTER.media, not .com. Because most of everything I post on YouTube or anywhere else goes first on Shifter. And there's a contact form. I'm easy to find. My podcast is not dead. I'm actually trying. I got a new little toy here. I got a new new iPad Pro.
Wow, that looks like.
That's the first Apple computer I've had to buy in 13 years. So my old iPad is still alive, and it's pretty crusty and gross and broken down, and the battery doesn't work that well. So I bought this, and it's really helpful for me as a teaching tool because students can fire images over to me, and I use the Apple Pencil to like draw and edit on them. And I want to do my podcast now with using the iPad because it's much smaller than the setup that I have right now. Like when I go to Japan, I can't carry my audio kit. It's a whole separate bag. So I want to figure that out. But there's the podcast and the regular blog posts and my main site. That's really it. And also I'm in the Blurb, ecoverse. So I'm doing a ton of stuff for Blurb, which is what this to-do list is right here. And I've got a mountain of stuff to do before I leave for Japan. So I'm a little nervous that I'm going to get it all done because it's going to take all the time I have remaining.
Oh, and by the way, speaking of Blurb, does Blurb have any kind of like way that high school and junior high school classes can engage with Blurb? I talked to a high school art teacher yesterday, and she was asking me, like, because I told her I still process my own film and then I scan it and print it. But she wanted to know, was there anywhere I knew that could do books, could print books? And I thought of Blurb immediately, but then I didn't know, what their budget was or anything like that. But does Blurb do educational outreach to schools?
Yeah. So we used to have, we had a dedicated educational, I wouldn't call it a department, but we had a person who was basically had a dedicated email address, and we had a discount system built in for schools. So that could be high school, community college, four-year college, art school. Most of the schools in the US, believe it or not, we are already sort of pseudo integrated into the platform. That means a lot of the big art schools to the community college photo programs, the creative writing programs, design and illustration. Oftentimes students are allowed to turn their work in quote Blurb form.
Oh, cool.
So, but here's the interesting part is we are in the process now of resurrecting the education component. So it's not ready right this second. But I'm always happy. You can always pass on my contact information to those folks because I talk to a lot of educators on a regular basis. And also I can help them understand what the offering is because there's a couple of things that we offer for students that are particularly useful and also not expensive. So, and I'm hoping what they do is come back with a sort of systemic discount program for schools to allow them to utilize Blurb.
Yeah, because I do think one of the things that is missing in the analog revival, the digital photography space, is the print, right? It's like, because the print is anathema to the platforms.
Yeah.
Right. And it also looks really good. And if you take a picture that you really like, you can print it and hang it up. or put it in a journal. I did that.
Yep, this is my current journal, and I'm constantly putting the New Mexico project spreads in there, testing and doing spreads and saying what works and what doesn't, pasting them in there. But you can see my office here; it's filled with photographic print. So yeah, printing scares a lot of people. You know, if you've grown up with shooting files and just posting, printing kind of scares people because, and I see it a lot in like workshop students where, you know, I'll say, show me the top 10 images. And they're like, that's impossible. And I'm like, no, that's editing. That's what it is. Show me the top 10, top 5, show me the single most important image that conveys this story. Oh, that's impossible. That's impossible. So, but again, they're not teaching editing. And a lot of folks today who were out in the photo space didn't have the luxury of going to photo school where you had to face a photo editor every day. And they were not necessarily nice people. This was the mental health era. This was you suck, you failed, go away. I don't want to look at you anymore. And then you'd be like, oh, that was painful. And you go back in the field the next day and do it. So sadly, they're not teaching editing is a rarity these days, which I think is one of the most interesting and fun aspects of workshops is when you sit and edit with people and show them the things about their work that they have not yet understood how to see. And it's one of the most amazing things about workshops is watching those pieces fall into place where people are like, oh my God, I now have a better understanding of my own work. So it's fun.
I can't remember if I heard from you or somebody else about Elliot Erwitt's book, Lost Not Found, where they edited like down from, I want to say some crazy number like 100,000 to like 25 or 15 or something like that, and then made it a book. And the book is awesome, but I cannot imagine how you do that. That's a lot.
Well, the interesting thing is, if you've ever sat with someone who's a professional editor, it is a different skill. It is an art form and a skill, and there's not many of these folks around anymore. When I was coming up, there were quite a few, and now most of them have either aged out or got let go or have changed their career, have moved on. But I just culled a body of work, 440 images to 40 and then down to 11. And the work was fantastic. And there was a bunch of different routes I could have gone. It wasn't my work. It was a Kurdish war photographer who basically is an amazing guy, just the nicest guy in the world. And he culled his own work down from thousands to 440, but we did that over a week time to go from 440 to 11. And the goal was to make a 20-page magazine. And the magazine was a trailer to a film that he was going to produce about the same work. So it's doable, and the more you practice, the better at it you get. And I'm in the process of editing a big contest right now. I'm looking at 200 different portfolios. And, I can tell by looking at a contact sheet, I can tell immediately what I'm looking at. I can tell what level the person's at. And those standout images that would end up in a book, I can spot like that because I've been doing last year, I did the same contest. It was another 200 portfolios. I look at work all the time. So again, it's like in some ways it makes me a bit jaded, I guess, because I've seen so much good work over the years that when I see stuff now that's being promoted that's not good, it's just like a noise in the night. Like I just look at it and say, okay, that person has mad marketing chops. They just forgot that they needed to learn how to make good pictures first. And so it's hard. And I'm looking, there's some names, when I see good photographers that are not working on good projects. Like they've done stuff in the past, but this project isn't quite there yet. And that's a normal, natural thing. And I think, again, we live in a world where everyone's like, no, everything's perfect. Everything's fine. They're unicorns and rainbows, where it's like, no, we're not. You're not going to hit a home run every time to the plate. Like if you can bat 300, you're a genius. And I think photography is very much the same.
Well, I agree with you. It is a whole completely different skill, but you do make it look very, very easy. And your work, I know you're the hardest working guy in show business, but you really do make it look easy given everything that I know that you're working on and what the stuff I must not know what you're working on. And I really want to thank you for making the time to do this. With me. It was something we talked about for a while, and I'm glad we finally did it.
You're very welcome. I'm just disappointed in one thing, and that is your collar is not turned up. Well, and your shirt is not peach. It's not peach.
I was in fake Zoom court right before we did this. So like I was wearing a tie that I took off. So, because I figured I was wearing a red and blue stripe rep tie, like I went to Harvard or something. And I figured if I wore the tie, you would make fun of me mercilessly. But I will say, though, in the 80s, I would wear one or two of these shirts on top of one another that were different colors. Some were made out of seersucker. Some were just made out of cotton. And I would turn the collar up. But, it was a different time, Dan.
Look, the Northeast male peach golf shirt, collar up, loafers. I mean, that is a species I am fascinated by. So next time, that's what I expect.
Listen, you'll come out here, and I'll lend you a shirt, and we'll go walk around some golf courses and make some pictures.
I'm in. I'm all in.
All right. Thanks again, Dan. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you. No problem. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Adios.
Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed listening to this podcast as much as I enjoyed making it. As you can tell, it did not disappoint in terms of being a podcast that covered various and sundry topics. But I enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed listening. I hope you go to shifter.media and check out Dan Milnor's work. He's a writer. He's a great photographer and a great storyteller. And I hope if you do decide to print your work, that you give Blurb a shot. You make your own journals, you make your own magazines, you can make your own art books. And if any of you have any questions about that, you can please feel free to drop us a line. Nothing I like talking about more than printing, because as you heard there closer to the end, one of the greatest things about taking a picture, seeing it on a screen, digitized, looking great, is printing it or getting it professionally printed and hanging it up so you can see it and enjoy it. So that's all for now. Again, I'm David Senoff, your host. This has been the Subconscious Photography Podcast. I hope you'd enjoyed it, and I look forward to speaking with you in the future very, very soon. Thanks again.
Also, please don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this journey with friends.